I count it pure joy to be with you. What a privilege to be able to proclaim my Lord and Savior by testimony. The story that you're about to hear this morning is true. The names have not been changed to protect the innocent. We're all guilty of something one time or another. But I've always told the story for two reasons and two reasons only. First and foremost, for the glory of God. And secondly, for the hope of his people. If there be a title of this story in the worldly sense, it could be compared to probably Mel Gibson, Die Hard, or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But if it would be compared to the spiritual sense, it would be that of John Newton, Amazing Grace. I come to you today not as a teacher, nor as a preacher, for I am not. But if there's one title, it's that as a witness. Being profoundly deaf all of my life, I have no sound, but the Lord has gave me my eyes to behold him, to bear testimony through sight. I have became a witness. I haven't always been deaf. At the age of 18 months, I lost my hearing due to unknown causes. Like a thief in the night, the sound went out forever. The next morning, my mother grew very concerned and called her neighbor who was a nurse. After a lot of discussion, I was rushed to the hospital. There the doctors examined me, turned to my mother and said those words that would follow her the rest of her life. There's no hearing there. She's profoundly deaf. And from that moment on, doctors and educators alike began to share with my parents it would be best to put me in a deaf institution, that I would never be able to learn to speak, and I would simply have a hard time just learning, period. I was their only daughter. I was the youngest in the family. They didn't want to send me packing. They kept me at home, and with that, they took a silent vow to themselves to try to give me every tool possible to enable me to live and to survive in that world of sound. One of the first tools came in form of car ride. When I got out that day, I stood on the curb as a little kid, and I looked up, and I saw this gray, monstrous castle. I mean, that's what it looked like to this little kid. And I walked in and I saw the big stone fireplace. I thought it was some sort of a dungeon. But in the back of the room, two very large doors opened very slowly that day. And out walked this little old lady. And she comes walking towards me, and I looked at her and I thought, boy, does she look awful old. But my next thought was, boy, she really looks awful mean. And she comes up towards me and she extends her hand to shake my hand. And I made the mistake of shaking her hand. Why was it a mistake? She let go. And with that, she begins to pull me back into that room that she just came out of. And that day, I entered a room like all others. It was a big room filled with big mirrors, huge mirrors hung on the walls. Big mirrors on stands, small and medium-sized mirrors all over the place. She took two chairs and she placed them in front of a large mirror. She sat me in one, she sat right next to me. And then we looked at each other in the mirror for an awful long time. And all of a sudden, she started to play that stupid silent mouth game that I had grown to hate. It's a game that my parents were playing, my brothers, neighbors, family, everyone. It's a game where everybody opened their mouth, but no sound came out. And here was this little old lady doing the same thing. But that day she did something very different. As she began to open her mouth, she reached down and she took my hand, and she laid my hand very lightly on her throat. And as she started to open her mouth, I could feel the vibrations on that throat, and it really got my attention. The only problem is she would stop moving her mouth, reach down to pick up a ball or an apple, and I'd be sitting on the edge of my seat waiting so desperately for her to move her mouth again. And as soon as she did so, I lunged for her neck and I held on for dear life. I didn't realize that when you strangle someone, you kill all the vibrations down. There's absolutely nothing to fear. Maybe a little air kind of hissing out the side of the mouth, you know? And she's trying to wrestle to get my hands off of her throat, and then flap it up and down like gravity ears to get it loose and light and lay gently back on her throat. I was right about this little lady. She was awful mean. Why? No matter how hard I tried to do what she wanted me to do, it was never good enough. All I ever saw on her face was a frown, her head shaking. No, you didn't do it right. No, that's not right. Over and over and over. And if I ever thought that that first half-hour session was my first and last, boy, was I wrong. She would be with me for the next 7 years of my life. But I thank God for that mean little lady. Without her life, her dedication, her persistency, I wouldn't have the voice to speak. And far beyond that, she had the wisdom and the knowledge to understand that she had given me all that she could, and yet I really still talk bad. So she passed me on to a voice teacher. And for years I've studied voice, not to sing opera, but basically just to get my voice to go up and down and up and down. And then after the years of voice, they brought in an English dramatic reading coach, where for years all I did was recite poetry for articulation and enunciation. I've had so many years to develop this voice, and yet I know I still talk funny. And people say, oh, you don't. I know I do. Well, how do you know that? I can be at the airport, a hotel, a restaurant, any place, any time, and somebody will always come up to me and say, where are you from? You really have an accent. Yep. You know, I've been claimed to be German. The British have claimed me because of a British accent. I mean, everybody thinks that I sound like a country. The only ones that haven't claimed me is the Chinese and the Japanese yet. But who knows, give me some time, I might start talking like them too. I don't know. Because any given moment, it's always different. Whether I'm tired, whether I'm not concentrating, it's just different. I know that I sound different. And you want to know something? This is where God comes in. Because it's in the weakness that we see the strength of God. If I didn't talk funny, people wouldn't listen to me. I go into schools, grade schools, kids 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they always say the same. You could have heard a pin drop in there. Why? Because the kids aren't sure what's going to come out next. The weakness is God's strength perfected in me. Yes, it took all these years, and now that I have the voice, I let it rip. You got it? Okay, we've got past talking funny, but I didn't realize how bad I really talked till opening day in school. What an eye-opener. I'm in school. The teacher knows that I'm deaf. She puts me right in the first row so I could try to read her lips as best as I could. And all I did was try to follow the class. Whatever they did, I tried to do. It came to the point where each one of us was to stand beside our desk and introduce ourselves to our classmates. I remember that day as though if it was yesterday. And I remember getting up, standing beside my desk, and very proudly introducing myself to my classmates by saying something like, "Ah!" And with that, the entire class erupted in laughter. Those kids were laughing so hard that day, I turned around to try to figure why everybody was laughing. And when I couldn't figure it out, well, I just sat down. But I came to realize that every time I was to open my mouth to speak, the entire class would erupt in laughter. And it got to the point where I wouldn't open my mouth. I remember my school days very well. I remember sitting in that front row, watching my teacher ask all sorts of questions like, what's the state capital to Ohio? And there I waited for the answer, only to see my teacher break into a big smile, shake her head, and say, very good, what's the state capital of Pennsylvania? And inside, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wait a minute, lady, first things first, what's the state capital to Ohio? I never realized that some smart kid behind me had raised his hand and gave the answer. As a result, I went through all of my school days just getting about all the questions there were, but I never got the answers. And my grades began to show that I wasn't getting the answers. They became D's and F's. And one day, my teacher came up to me at my desk, and she looked awful sad that day. And she reached down and she took my hand and hurried. She led me out of the classroom. And that day, we walked down the hallway, and it seemed like it was an awful long walk. And that was the day I entered another class. I entered what was known as the mentally retardation class. And from that day on, I never said a word. I never knew the answer. Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. And in the midst of all this, the kids knew I had 5 boys in my class, not just one, but 5. And these 5 guys were ordained to make my life as miserable as possible because they knew that I wouldn't speak. Rather, they waited for me by the drinking fountain, in the playground, in the hallway, to push me, to poke me, to make my life so miserable. But yeah, God made me a fighter. That these guys, that they didn't realize I had 3 older brothers at home. And in the middle of the playground, when they least expected it, I did the only thing that I could possibly do. I punched them out, and I nailed them flat. And then I went to the principal's office to be disciplined. I get the spanking. I'd be told, girls, do not punch guys out. You can't do this, okay? And so I go back to my classroom, and the tears would start to flow. But basically, God, in many forms, gave me the strength, what I needed in various ways when the opportunity arose. There were 3 things in my life as a child. There was a gift from God that would help me and save me from total despair. First and foremost, He gave me parents that basically taught me that there was a God, a supreme being, and I was created in His image. At the time of that lesson and the teaching of God, they instilled in me that God does not make mistakes. They also taught me about His Son Jesus, that if I would take my hand and put it into Jesus' hands and walk with Him, there wouldn't be anything that I couldn't do or anything that I could become. My parents instilled in faith in me as a young child. I only wish I had carried that all the days of my life. The second thing was a song. You get this? I'm profoundly deaf, but He gave a deaf kid a song. No, I don't have any recollection of music, but I had a mother that loves music, and she wanted to pass that love on to her only daughter, whether she could hear it or not. And as a little kid, she would put me in her lap, and she sat in the rocking chair, rocking back and forth, singing all of her favorite songs. And with my head on her shoulder as she sang, I could feel the vibrations. And if I really liked the song really, really well, my hand would sort of creep up and lay gently on her throat that I could get all the vibes. Well, it must have been around Christmas time, because one of the first songs my mom ever taught me was Silent Night. And I love that song. No, the words didn't mean anything to me. Rather, it was the rhythm and the flow of that song that brought forth tremendous peace. That I can remember going to the principal's office, getting that spanking, going back to my classroom, sitting at my desk, looking out the window, biting the lower part of my lip so I wouldn't start crying. And way down deep inside, I would start singing Silent Night to myself, and I get a handle on it. Or I can remember going home on the school bus, sitting so close to that window that when I looked out, my nose would be all squished up against the glass, so nobody would see the tears coming down my face. And all the way home, I sang Silent Night, and I had that peace. The third element came in form of a skating rink. Wow, when God wants to give us things, it comes in every imaginable packages, small and great, different ways. This was one of his ways with a skating rink. One day, I went with my father to pick up my brothers who were skating. By the time the session ended, Dad had signed me up for skating lessons. With those lessons, I started to skate forwards and backwards and jumps and spins. And somebody came up with this idea, hey, this kid's really good. You need to put her in competition. But that's when they realized they had a problem. If you ever watch the Olympic skaters skate on TV, you realize that when the skaters skate, they skate to music. Every jump has to be landed on the beat. Every spin has to be stopped on the beat. And if for nothing else, when the music is over, the routine better be over too. Music, I didn't even know they were playing it, let alone skate to it. With that, I had a coach that took it upon himself to skate hand in hand with me at the correct beat of that music over and over and over till I had it down pat. And on that given moment, I skated out into the middle of the rink by myself, and I looked across, and there was my coach on the outskirts, standing perfectly still and straight. And all of a sudden, he'd be jumping up and down, waving his hands, and that was a signal to take off the music, son. Well, to make a long story very, very short, at the ripe old age of 7, I became the youngest Ohio State champion freestyle skater in skating history, and it saved my life big time. Why is that? Well, I might have talked awful funny, and everybody thought that I was the dummy, but there wasn't one kid in my school, not one of them, that had a bigger trophy than I did. And there wasn't one kid that could do the jumps or the spins like I could. And it gave me the self-worth that I needed to hang on to. But aside from collecting all of these trophies, aside from being a champion, there was something that I wanted far greater. I wanted a friend. Let's face it, who wants to be a friend to a dummy, to somebody that talks funny, that walks funny, that looks funny, that acts funny? I never knew what the word friendship meant until I got into my junior year in high school. And by then, I was looking for any type of friend. It didn't matter. My junior year, I started hanging out with a group which we would deem losers. Why? Because they were going their own rebellious way. They were stealing, they were drinking, they were doing drugs, and I was with them. Why? They accepted me. Early, I thought they accepted me. During this period of my time, I had gradually been crying out to God, please, let me hear, give me my hearing. And it was always the same answer. the great silence. I was on a collision course of self-destruction my junior year in high school when I met up with another mean little old lady. She was my typing teacher. And God used her to straighten my life out by having me work at the typewriter, teaching me how to type really, really fast, starting out at 27 words a minute, 56, 112, 138, 157, 176. I finally maxed out on that typewriter at 198 words a minute. You should see me on my BlackBerry today. And that teacher knew something that every teacher should have known. No dummy can be typing this fast. So she came to me one day, she said, "You're out of here in 1 year. What do you want to do?" And that was a pretty embarrassing question for me. I finally blurted out, "Well, I want to go to college." Well, you know, that little old lady just about fell off her typewriter. I mean, she knew my grades were decent except for typing. She knew all the kids were still making my life miserable. She knew how I hated school. So she just couldn't believe when I said, "I just want to keep going to school." So she had asked that question, why? Why do you want to go to college? And that was the ultimate embarrassing question for me in my life. I couldn't even look at her that day. I stared down at the floor and I finally said, "Because I just want to be like everybody else." She believed in me, and she began to work with me one-on-one. And through her life, I went to college. I just didn't realize it would take me 8 years to leave that place. 8 years before I would get that college diploma. And the day that I graduated, I thought the world couldn't wait to hire me. And after all, I'm a college graduate. Boy, was I wrong. There wasn't one person willing to give me a job, not one. Why? She's deaf. She can't answer the phone. She's deaf. She might misunderstand what somebody's saying. I never got the job. And with that, I went back to the same hearing and speech center that taught me to speak, pounded on their doors, asking for a job. I know they felt sorry for me. They hired me, even when they didn't have a job. I became like a gopher, a jack of all trades, doing whatever they wanted me to do. And I can remember some days taking paper clips out of one box, sticking those paper clips in another box, and then put them in the closet. That was it. But before the foundation of time, when God created me, He had a plan, a divine purpose. He knew the script of my life, and He knew we were just getting started. You see, it was at Hearing and Speech Center that I met a friend, who in turn had a friend that lived in Washington, D.C., who in turn had a friend that worked for the Department of State, who in turn had a friend that worked for the FBI. You guys following this? This is important, okay? Through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend from Washington, D.C. to Youngstown, Ohio, I get word that the FBI is looking for deaf people. And if you don't think that I panicked, I thought to myself, what did we do? They tried to calm me down saying, "Thomas, you didn't do anything." They just want to know, do you want a job? Do I want a job? Somebody's finally going to hire me for who I am. Scratch that. I'm going to work for the federal government. Who cares? Me. I'm going to be with the FBI. And I couldn't wait to get to Washington, D.C. That first week was like a dream come true. They took me around, they introduced me to all the special agents. And then after all the introduction was over, they took me downstairs to the firing range where all the agents practiced their target shooting. That was their very first mistake. Their second mistake is when they handed me a Thompson 45 submachine gun. I shot up their entire ceiling that day without even trying. It was a long time before they let me go back downstairs. Like go back downstairs for a while. And then the next day, I started my training to become what was known as a fingerprint examiner for the FBI. Within the first 5 minutes, I realized I had made the greatest mistake of my life. Someday, when you don't have anything else to do, just take a look at any one of your fingers real closely and all those funny lines, they're fingerprints. It was my job, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, to count every single one of those lines on that finger. And I can honestly tell you, if you have seen one fingerprint, you have seen them all. To this day, I have questioned the FBI. Who was the creative mind of them hiring deaf people for this job? And then when I thought about it, it's a no-brainer. Because before deaf people did this, they had hearing people counting those lines. You see, some of these fingerprints have 32, 48, 12. Everybody's different. So you get a hearing person that's in there, and they're starting to count 1, 2, 3, 4. Somebody sneezes. Person stops, looks around to find out who sneezed. Now they have to start back at the beginning. 1, 2, 3. All of a sudden, somebody drops the book on the floor. So they stop to find out who dropped the book on the floor. Then they have to go back and start counting 1, 2, 3. Well, if they hire a deaf person, the atom bomb could drop. They won't hear it. They'll just keep counting forever. Touchdown success. They win with deaf people. Wow. But me, get me out of here, Lord. I'm not cut out for counting lines the rest of my life. And I began praying this urgent prayer. Oh, Father, please, not this. Just get me out of here. Well, one day, my supervisor comes running in. She's all upset. She takes one look at me, and she tells me to stop. They want to see you at the front office. There's only 2 reasons the person goes to the front office of the FBI. Either to be terminated from the job or to be interrogated by the FBI agents. That day, I walked down the hallway very, very slowly. And when I entered the room, there were 9 men standing on the wall, each of them in 3-piece suits, looking typical like G-men. They took one look at me and they told me to sit down. And then they started to ask the questions. And they went something like this. Miss Thomas, we understand that you read lips to communicate and you do a very good job. But there's only one thing we want to know, just one thing. Do you watch TV? Do I watch TV? I mean, that's all you guys want to know? I mean, is it a federal crime to watch TV? I confess, I watch TV. Well, is it difficult for you, Miss Thomas, to get anything out of it? Well, yeah, I do. I mean, no, I don't. I mean, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? You know, if the camera's on the person, I can see their lips, I can read them. But so many times on television, the camera's not even on the person, so I don't see it, so I don't get it. Well, how about movies, Miss Thomas? Do you go to movies? Is it any better for you? Yep, I go to movies. It's a lot better for me, too. It really is, you know. It's the lips. They're a lot bigger. On and on went the questions. And I came to realize that the FBI had a very large problem. They were video filming those suspects on this particular case. But when the camera activated, the sound mechanism failed. They had all this tape with the bad guys talking. They just couldn't hear it. They wanted to know if I would watch the tape and write down any words that I saw. I said, sure. From that day on, I never went back to reading fingerprints for the FBI. I read lips for the FBI. To sum up my job, I followed the bad guys around. I read their lips, then I went and told the good guys what the bad guys were saying. And they even paid me to do it, too. Overnight, like at the snap of a finger, I was success in the hearing world. I was known as the FBI's secret weapon because the bad guys didn't know that I was out there following them, reading their lips, writing it down. So sometimes, with police, you have 24-hour surveillance. They have to follow the bad guys all over the place. Me, all I had to do was sit in a meeting where Joe was telling Timmy, meet me on 23rd Street, 9 o'clock next week with Tom. I told it to the FBI. There was no tailgating. The FBI just showed up when I told them to show up, and they paid me to do it. It was a phenomenal job. I mean, it's the highlight and the dream of any career. And I should have been thrilled, but I wasn't. Way back, during my early years, with the bullies, the laughter, the rejection, I was still carrying this. Way back, I had asked God, please, give me my hearing. I'm now very successful with the FBI. I'm older. I'm 35 years of age. And with being older, I'm wiser. So I've come to the conclusion that my parents were wrong. God indeed made a mistake in my life. And it was a big whopper of a mistake. How could I justify my thinking with that? Okay? When God created me, He created me with a heart that absolutely loves people. I thrive with people. I can't get enough of people. In fact, when I stand before Him and He opens the book of life, He's going to look down to try to find my name. He's going to find it, and right next to it, there's going to be a hyphen, a notation that says, God's greatest party animal. I love a good time. The very thing that I love, I can't have. He took it away from me when He overtook my life with the great silence. Yes, I'm an expert lip reader that can read one-on-one. I can even do two people, and then it's like watching tennis play. They'll talk, they'll stop, they'll talk, they'll stop, they'll talk, they'll talk, they'll talk. I get it. For every person you add into my mess, I start deteriorating rate at an alarming rate. I can't follow it. The very thing that I want, I am denied. I can't have it. 35 years of age, being successful with the FBI, I still can't fit in with my peer pressures. I can't go to the parties. I can't be with them. I'm alienated. I'm lonely. And I'm growing very, very bitter and hostile. And my patience with God has worn very thin. He made a mistake. So at the age of 35, after 3.5 years, I resigned from the FBI with a mission to find God, to make Him confess He made a mistake. I ended up in Columbia, South Carolina, in the seminary at Columbia Bible School, which is now known as Columbia International University. God knew that I was coming. God knew the battle of the world was about to step forth on that campus, and He was ready for me. God knew that I could not handle any more than one person. So what did He do? He had 21 people waiting for me. Not just one, but 21. 21 students that every single day we attended the classes together, we ate our meals together, we studied, we prayed continuously. Not just one, not just two, but 21. I would go back to my apartment at the end of the day, and in the rage of bitterness and hatred, I would shred everything up. I would destroy anything on my walls. I mean, there was the rage with me. And I came to the point of saying, God, all of my life, I had asked for only one thing, that I could have my hearing, that I could just have one friend to be able to relate to. And it was always the silence. So if you're not going to do anything for me, God, I'll do it myself. And with that, I totally dropped the hand of God and went my own way, getting what I wanted at all costs. And the cost was great. I went to one of those 21 students, and I told her a lie. Can I ask, has anyone ever told a lie to get what they wanted? Has anyone ever stolen to get what they wanted? Has anyone ever did anything just for the sake of getting what they wanted? If you have, then you'll have a little understanding. But for me, this was major. Because by this time, when I left God, He had turned me over to a depraved mind. I went my own way, and I told the lie. And what lie could you possibly tell, sir, that would be so condemning, so destroying? I told this one friend that I had a terminal disease, that I was dying. You what? Yeah. I told her I was dying. Why would you do that? Because in my warped thinking, I thought if she believed me, she would want to spend as much time with me one-on-one. And that's exactly what happened. I got what I wanted. But what I didn't realize in the split second that I told this lie, that it would last for over 7 long months. And I had no idea that the first person I told this lie, that it would fan out to those 21 different people and go far beyond that, where the whole campus realized that I was dying. The whole entire campus was praying for divine healing. You want to talk about the God in heaven that knows all, that sees all, every word that we say, every act that commits. He knew I did not need a physical healing. He knew I needed a spiritual healing. And by the cries of the people, they went up to the point God's hand came down so heavy upon me. He crushed me. I became disoriented. My body was wasting away. The professors thought that I wouldn't even be living for another week when I couldn't take it anymore. Then I went back to that same person I told the lie to, and I said, please, I need you to call my advisor. Tell my advisor I need to see him immediately, that he should have another faculty member with him. That night, I met with those 2 men, tears streaming down my face. I confessed my sin. I knew that I would have to go to those 21 different people to tell them the truth. And I was ready to do that. But what I didn't know is that I would have to stand before the entire academic committee of that college. The night before I was to meet the committee and all of those men was the longest, darkest, quietest night of my life. The shame and the guilt was unbearable. Where I began to pack my bag to run away, I couldn't face it. And as I was packing my suitcase, basically my Bible fell on the floor and it fell open. And I picked up my Bible and I looked at it. And then I looked at it again. You see, I didn't go to seminary to study Bible. I didn't go to become a missionary or a teacher or a preacher. I came with the mindset of finding God and making him confess. So it was no surprise when I looked down at my Bible and I'm in the book of Hosea. It's no surprise that I didn't even know there was Hosea in the Bible. I had never been to that part of the Bible, and now God's opening Hosea right before my eyes. Then it got my attention where I started to read the 14th chapter of Hosea. And as I read, it was the still small voice of God that was penetrating my soul. And he wasn't just talking to me. He was giving me a promise that I held on to for dear life, that the next morning I stood before the entire academic committee and confessed my sin. And I told them that the only way that I could stand before them was because last night, in my darkest hour, God gave me a promise, and I was standing up. Do you know what I remember more than anything else, other than the humiliation and the shame standing before those men? I remember seeing one man sit in the chair, bowed over with his head on his hands, shaking his head back and forth as I confessed, and seeing tears fall to the floor. I will never forget it. You know who that one man was? He was the president of the university. He didn't know me, but that man wept for my transgression. He loved the Lord so deeply, he wept for me without even knowing me. I'll never forget that. And so what was the promise? 37 years ago, in my darkest, quietest, shameful period of my life, God spoke from Hosea 14 when he said, "O Thomas, return to the Lord your God, for you have been crushed by your sin. Come back to me, for my anger will be freely gone. I will love you, Thomas. You will blossom like a lily. Your roots will go deeply into the soils of Lebanon, and your people shall return from exile far away and will rest beneath my shadow." 37 years ago, he gave me that promise. And I have seen the fulfillment of that promise in every aspect of that scripture, except for one. I have not seen the anger of God upon me. I have blossomed like a lily. You know, people will come up to me, and before I have this understanding, they would say to me, "Oh, you're so beautiful." And I would think, what, this hunk of clay? And God would stop me dead in my tracks and said, "Soon, I told you, you will blossom like a lily. If the people can see the beauty, they see me. Yes, I blossom like a lily. My feet have been planted, they will not be moved. I have seen the fulfillment of that promise, except for the very last verse. That my people from exile, from far away, will rest beneath his shadow." Since that day, I've only had one desire only, to go to every nation, to stand before every single generation, to proclaim the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The sovereign grace of God, the powerful, almighty God, that changes and transforms our lives. And I had to remember that that was my heart desire, but I didn't know how God would answer. With that, he would go back to the FBI. He would create a TV show called Sue Thomas FBI. In the United States, some 4 million people watched it. But beyond my wildest comprehension, 64 nations around the world watched Sue Thomas FBI. And because of that, God has opened the door for me to stand and proclaim the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. 2 years ago, I was here at India. I met one of the students from India. It was late in the evening, and he had something that he wanted to discuss with me. So he came, and he was kind of going around the bush, and finally, I looked at him and I said, Solomon, are you here to invite me to come to India? And he said, yes, ma'am. I said, it would be my privilege. God took me to India, and I thought that I would be going to each of the small villages in the church, and I was all excited about that. But God had a bigger picture, because you see, in India, they watch Sue Thomas FBI. So basically, I'm going down the streets, the cities of India. The big billboards have my picture and all these words in India that I couldn't read, but I knew it was me because of my picture, and I knew also because they had FBI. God used the FBI to draw the people in India, of the masses of the thousands to come hear the story of Sue Thomas. They thought that they were getting this big TV celebrity. And I told them, big, yes, celebrity, no. I'm here as God's greatest sinner, saved by his grace and his grace alone. That night, there was one of the big government officials were in the hotel. I was told later, these men were sitting on the balcony. The government of India heard the full story, the testimony that God in his grace saves the people. They got the gospel. This is not what I have planned for my life. But before the foundation of time, he created me. He knew I would die, and he knew that I would fall, and that he would rise me up, and that I would live in his glory forever. But we're talking about Christianity today. I'm a witness. I've spoken in every denomination of all the churches, and I can testify for what I'm saying. We're in deep trouble with the body of our churches today. Why? Because we have diluted our faith. How have we diluted it? We have diluted it by emotions. We love our faith by emotion, by sensationalism, by prosperity, and that is not our faith. Our faith is dying. It's dying. It's only until we die that we truly can live. When did you come to know the Lord? From that moment on, did you make the decision? It's me, it's I, the great I am. Or did you make it for God? Do you live for God? Do you live for yourself? And it's very easy to judge, because on those moments, on any given day, if your nose goes out of joint and you're getting in the pit in your stomach and you get all upset and you have this headache because you didn't get your way, then you know you're the great I am. I can testify to the fact when you truly know the Lord and you truly die and he lives in you, absolutely nothing on planet Earth will rob that joy. Nothing will rob the peace that surpasses all understanding. There is your gain. You start getting upset. You start getting out of line. You cry out immediately, God, forgive me. Not I, but thy be done. Go back every single day, whether it's 5, 7, 9, 10 times a day. Pray the Lord's Prayer. And when you pray that prayer, as many times as you pray it, you go into those words. You go, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You say that prayer, you live that prayer, and you will have absolutely nothing else to worry about all the days of your life. The Lord's Prayer in Psalm 23, I say at least 10 to 15 times a day. I meditate. That is my portion. Yes, the rest of the way is there, but I constantly have that before me. Friend, it has been pure joy to be before you. You have heard the real story of Sir Thomas, FBI, and I have never told the story without the song. For God's grace, for all that He has done, for the peace that He has given into my life, the transformation, I confess, I was transformed. The one thing that I hated the most, the silence, has become my best friend. I hear the voice of God. The silence teaches me if I listen. The silence directs my path. That is the transformation of the cross. And with the silence, and for the glory of all that He has done, this is my song. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round and virgin mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. I challenge you, my friends, do not become a liberal Christian, nor become a conservative Christian. With all of your heart, become radical. Give all for the sake of the gospel. Let all the world know that you are different, that they will see the one true and living God in each of your life as you go forth to make Him known for what you have come to know. May you go forth in His name and serve Him with all of your heart. God bless you.